Hello and welcome to this episode of Bush Talks, where we take a look at what is happening in Namibia's biomass utilisation and bush control industry in Namibia. We've got some experts in studio with us who are going to share with us their views on what we should do with our bush biomass. Hello and welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
It's great to have you in studio. Michael, if I can start with you, would you introduce yourself?
Thank you once again. My name is Michael Humavindu. I'm a Deputy Executive Director in the Ministry of Industrialisation and Trade.
It's wonderful to have you on the show.
I'm Chris Brown from the Namibian Chamber of Environment.
I'm Colin Lindeque. I'm the Managing Director of Carbon Capital.
Fantastic. So we're discussing what we should do with our bush biomass. Perhaps we can start off with, why is it a good idea for us to export our bush biomass?
Three things for us as a government. First of all, we need to diversify economy. Bush industry is one way that we see that we can diversify the economy. Secondly, we're actually seen as a leader in SADC to drive the bush-based sector. So we need to ensure that we show very good competitive products out there. And thirdly is obviously the socio-economic issues, employment and rural revitalization and the link to agriculture.
The other reason is to drive a bush thinning program in Namibia to provide the economy behind rangeland restoration in Namibia. Our rangelands have been degraded because of bush encroachment, and this offers us an incentivized way of addressing that problem.
And I think it's important to extract the highest value possible for our resources. So in most cases, export markets are higher paying, or at least the target markets can be higher paying than our domestic market. So it's important for us to get the best value possible from our resource, and sometimes export markets allow that.
And on that note, what are the possible markets in other countries?
So I think our efforts in the biomass sector have been focused on Europe. Europe has the highest standards typically when it comes to natural resources or natural resource-based products. Especially with biomass, they've got the most stringent regulations around that, and it's only becoming more and more stringent. But what that means is, coupled to our extremely sustainable biomass, which puts us in a very unique position, we get an exclusive access into certain markets where others can't enter those markets because they cannot meet the sustainability requirements. So I think the European market is still the most interesting for us. It's a high-paying market. The consumers there are very self-conscious about environmental responsibility and climate change. So they make decisions based on that when purchasing goods and products. So I think that's still the most important market for us.
Fantastic. And this has been something that's been taken care of in the sense of the sustainability. It's something that's a driver in Namibia.
Yes, I mean the market is actually forcing Namibian value chains to meet their standards, which is great for our own market. It means that we are being held to a very high standard, and we are doing things as sustainably and ethically as possible.
Fantastic. Michael, do you want to add on a little bit in terms of the export to other countries?
Yeah, we basically realized that the most advanced value chain is obviously the charcoal. And there we're also seeing new markets coming through. The Arabs, the Asian markets is coming to make inquiries at the ministry in terms of how do they get access into this market. We have seen some investors from Northern Africa, Nigeria specifically, opening up some of the plans in the industry. But we are also realizing that we actually need to do more around packaging and also other new products around your biochar and animal feed that can get into the AfCFTA market, the African Free Continental Free Trade, because we're also seeing some inquiries around what can we get from your bush biomass as a new industry that can support the trade between African countries.
So let's talk about some of the products that we're exporting. What are these?
For the most part, we're exporting charcoal in its finished form and as well as its bulk form. And we also export a significant amount of firewood. Those are the two main export products within the biomass sector. We are developing a host of different products within Namibia. I'm aware of a wood plastic composite manufacturing process that's starting up now, which will also be exporting those composite products to Europe. But for the most part, in terms of volume and value, charcoal is by far the largest product being exported.
Okay, great. And Michael, you spoke about stuff that we need to do. What's that?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of issues. We need to ensure that we develop entrepreneurs, the SMEs. We do some training along with the Charcoal Association. We have trained so far more than 50 SMEs, MSMEs. We also need to ensure that we have appropriate standards. That is key for the Namibia Standards Institute. We need to ensure that we have incentives that support the development of those alternative value chains, whether it is animal feed or biochar, and even the wood plastic planks. That is very key that the Ministry of Finance and our Ministry of Industry comes together and develop incentive package that helps the newly entrepreneurs that are in this field to be able to be competitive. So it's very key that we do that. And also the VTCs, our vocational graduates institutes, needs to ensure that we have a supply of people that are able to get into this industry and support. On the logistics side, which is also important because these value chains needs a lot of linkages to the other supply chains, such as your logistics, which is key. We also need to ensure that our SMEs that are in that space appreciate and understand what it means to be able to support such an industry or those sub-industries that evolve from that.
Perhaps let's talk now then about some of the downsides of exporting bush biomass.
I see very few downsides, particularly when we're exporting to countries such as the EU, where they set these high standards and require certification and other measures. If we're exporting to countries where such measures are not required, then there are opportunities for ecological mismanagement. But where our focus is on countries that set those high standards, I see very few downsides, only positive aspects to the economy, to jobs, to rangeland restoration, and many other aspects, innovation in the country and so on.
So I saw both of you gentlemen were nodding. What are some of these positives?
I'll look at the resilience of the supply chain impact when you have standards requirements that are supporting your industry to be competitive. Because also if you look at the advanced value chain of charcoal, we see a lot of socio-economic issues there that might come through. Treatment of labor when things go wrong, safety and occupational health issues. So when you are able to create a traceable standard system right to where that charcoal is harvested and produced, you're able to ensure that that entity that is supplying that local Namibian entity is adhering to the best labor and safety regulations. And from us as Ministry of Trade, that's what we also want to see.
Anything you can add on there in terms of those standards, Colin?
Yeah, I think the standards drive development in the sector. They raise the bar and they continue to evolve. So it's not a static state. We are continuously in the charcoal sector being subjected to new standards or stricter standards, and I think that forces the industry to be more responsible for the socio-economic and the environmental concerns. So that's very important.
I think there are two other things which we could also mention. The resource is a very large one, and it's a self-generating resource, so it's a sustainable long-term harvest. It's not going to be depleted in the near term, so it's something which will be with us for a long time. The other thing about it is the fact that it's carbon neutral, and in terms of global energy requirements at the moment, that gives us a very, very strong competitive advantage. So I think all these things taken together, provided that we're supplying to responsible countries and maintain these certification standards and labeling, puts us in a very strong position.
Beautiful. Perhaps you can also just elaborate a little bit more in terms of that resource being available and plentiful.
Well, we've got in the order of, I think, 14 to 16 million hectares of land, which sadly has become bush encroached. And that has happened as a result of the types of rangeland management which have been brought into Namibia since the start of the colonial era. And those Eurocentric rangeland management practices have resulted in this bush encroachment which we have. So what we're focusing on is really restoring rangeland to its pre-damaged condition. And that creates better sort of soil carbons, it creates better biodiversity, and a whole range of ecological issues that go along with it. So it's rangeland restoration at the same time as creating an economic opportunity with jobs and so on. So it's a really a very positive, double positive type of impact that we're having. The one constraint that we do have is that not everyone everywhere understands this. And that is one of our challenges, to get information out to the world to explain that this is actually a rangeland restoration project, not a deforestation project. When people hear about bush being cut, they automatically assume that we're involved with deforestation. And to get that message across that this is actually rangeland restoration, not deforestation, is quite a difficult thing. And that's one of the challenges we face at the moment.
If you had the platform to the ear of the whole world and 1 minute to share the message of what this is about, what would each of you gentlemen say?
Well, I always say that it's not an invader bush, it's an enabler bush. It's an enabler bush for industrialization, for job creation, for environmental sustainability, and also to ensure that we have an ecological carbon sink that is sustained. So that's our message as a ministry in terms of this matter.
Beautiful. And Chris, what would your message be?
I would say that it's an ecological program to restore the health of the ecosystems to the condition pre-colonization. And at the same time, it's an economic opportunity, a huge long-term economic opportunity to use that to create local wealth and jobs in the country.
Beautiful. Colin?
I'd say it's the most sustainable, or one of the most sustainable biomass resources in the world. We can meet the most stringent standards and requirements, and it's a massive opportunity for the global market that has been typically overlooked. So I'd say it's still got a lot of opportunity left to develop.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, we've spoken about some of the international markets. Let's talk about some of the domestic markets. What are the domestic markets when talking biomass utilization?
Well, obviously it's a braai. That's what people want to utilize it. But you see more people that are in the regenerative farming space asking and also getting training through our ministry in biochar, for example, that also has downstream effects in terms of fertilizers. You see also opportunities for people making animal feed. And one of our programs that we have in Oshuarongo is a project that looks at packaging. Because that's also a sector. You get people that can package charcoal, but we're also training them in making animal feed. And then we're also training them in terms of ensuring that they know and appreciate standards. But there are also other things now, looking at alternative building materials, which is one of the National Land Resolution, National Land Conference resolutions. And I think we, as a ministry, we are starting to front load what we learned from that value chain study of GIZ of 2015 around that it can also support the housing sector.
Anything you'd like to add on there, Chris?
Well, we've just done a survey of a whole bunch of farms up in the north around Etosha, and we've seen during this difficult period of COVID and the droughts up there that a large number of farmers have incorporated charcoal production into their farming activities, which has really diversified their livelihoods and helped them get through this very difficult time when tourists weren't coming, hunters weren't coming, drought, their animal numbers were down. So it is really a part of farming, agricultural and rural development diversification.
Fantastic. Colin, anything you want to add on there?
Yeah, I think we have an opportunity to revolutionize and modernize our energy sector locally. We have to always be cognizant of the fact that 50% of Namibians still rely on firewood as their primary energy source. And that's something that we need to change. And I think that with ongoing projects and ongoing developments within the sector, we're going to see more and more energy generation switch from fossil fuels and very rudimentary fuels such as firewood into more modernized fuels and energy. I specifically refer to the NamPower project, which is looking at generating 40 megawatts of electricity from bush. There are also smaller scale technologies that could help decentralized electrification as well. And then some of our large industrial energy users in the country have also made the switch from fossil fuels such as coal and heavy fuel oil to using a renewable biomass. So I think in terms of our market potential in Namibia, that's the singularly biggest potential for us, because energy, every Namibian needs energy, and that's where the real opportunity is. The challenge in Namibia generally in terms of a market is that we're quite a small market. We don't have buying power in the market, so it's a challenging market to develop an industry around. But I think energy being so core to any country's economy becomes the most interesting space. But I also want to add, I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned is feed production. Not only can we use the biomass as a fallback during drought periods to sustain our livestock, but we can also produce feed for ourselves off of the biomass. There's a project near Windhoek that is growing mushrooms on the biomass, so we can even exploit it for our own food needs and our own nutritional requirements.
That's fascinating, and food security is something that the whole world needs to be looking at, and if we can find ways of using what we've got to become food secure, that would be quite amazing. Is there anything else that you gentlemen would like to add on to those points, especially when talking food security and energy production?
Yeah, we've already mentioned obviously the animal feed, but then there's also the sticky thing that grows on the acacia. It's quite a big one in terms of small-scale farmers harvesting it. The name just disappeared from my mind, but it's also very key in terms of ensuring that you create a sustainable food system around small-scale farmers. It's quite big in the Sahel, but it's something that we didn't give a lot of attention in terms of our value chains. Okay. And that's where we're also going to focus on. It's an additive. It's actually an additive in the confectionery as well as in the brewing industry and making cool drinks. But Namibia has not explored that option. We're also looking into that.
So lots of opportunities. And Chris, something you'd like to add there?
No, I don't think so. I think from a food security point of view, one of the best ways to ensure food security is to have people having jobs. When people have got money in their pocket, they can buy food. And the more jobs that can be created through this industry, as well as all the other efforts, the better. So job creation for me is often the most important aspect that we can be looking at.
In terms of our soil health, biomass has a big role to play, both from a biochar perspective, also from a composting perspective. Namibia generally has very poor soils, and this land degradation doesn't help that, and the poor rainfall doesn't help that. So for our subsistence farmers especially, I think there's an opportunity to leverage the biomass resource to improve the quality of our soils, and that will obviously also have a positive impact on the agricultural productivity as well as the food security for those marginalized subsistence farmers. We are also developing biochar projects in Namibia to prove the high potential for biochar to improve crop health and productivity, as well as to retain more soil moisture and nutrients in the root zone in agricultural systems.
We've mentioned quite a lot around standards. That's come through quite a lot, and I'm interested to understand this a little bit more, international as well as domestic, and how they apply to this industry.
Yeah, I think I could give some insight. I mean, we have an operational charcoal project at the moment that is fully FSC certified, and FSC stands for Forest Stewardship Council certification, and what that means is that there's a value chain, and that it's measured, and the impact is assessed for the value chain. So we are required through FSC to make sure that all of our workers are treated fairly. They all have contracts, they're all contributing towards social security. We also need to ensure that we're harvesting in a sustainable manner, and that if we're buying in resources, that we make sure that our suppliers are harvesting on a sustainable manner. And we also need to ensure that generally our suppliers, whoever they may be, if it's a transport service provider or a wood supplier, need to be operating in an ethical manner. So it's a control system that affects every touch point of the value chain, and it's a third-party control. It's not to say that we wouldn't do these things ourselves, but it's a secondary layer of protection to ensure that nothing falls through the gaps. And beyond FSC, there are also new certification standards that we are looking at implementing here. There's the Renewable Energy Directive from the European Union, which is being constantly evolved, and the new RED III standard is coming into force. So if we want to look at any export of energy products in the future into the EU market, we need to be RED III compliant. So that's a new standard that will be coming into play. And also on the charcoal side, there are other standards that are also being implemented in Namibia. One of them is the BSCI standard, which is more focused on the social aspect of the value chain. So FSC is focused on three pillars, the environmental pillar, the social pillar, and the economic pillar. But on the other hand, certain certification schemes like BSCI focus specifically on one of those pillars, and BSCI is a socially orientated standard, again being implemented now in the sector because of pressure from the markets in Europe for us to comply. BSCI is extremely comprehensive. It requires all the service providers in the value chain to adhere to certain good practices. So even if I'm buying paper clips for the office in our charcoal operation, the supplier of those paper clips has to adhere to BSCI requirements.
So quite regulated, but obviously looking after the best interest of the people involved in this industry, as well as what it can produce. And what we've heard here is that there is a lot of opportunities that are available in this industry, as well as the benefits that are coming back to the country, back to the environment, and back to the people. Really, really impressive stuff. Is there any benefits that we have not mentioned yet that you'd like to share in terms of the opportunities?
Basically, I want to come back to, it's actually, the product is called Arabic gum. That's what you get from the acacia. And even in terms of the standard issue, imagine Namibia now harvesting Arabic gum, and you are competing against the Sahel countries that are far advanced in terms of supplying the Coca-Cola of these worlds, in terms of that as an additive in making this, the products that they do. I wanted to come back to the issue of standards, because we also need to ensure that we look at, as a government, we see the disparities. We realize that some are afraid of the cost of compliance that they see, and it's also a matter of us to educate and raise awareness that it's not necessarily the cost of compliance that you should be worried about. You should also look at the price in terms of the premium that you'll get if you have a higher standardized product. We're actually now creating a national standardization strategy so that we can increase our awareness and also consultations for colleagues, for the business fraternity in the country, to realize the value of having standards in the country.
I think one of the, in a way it's a challenge, but in another way it's a huge opportunity, is to expand the bush thinning and the whole biomass program from the freehold land onto some of the communal areas where there's severe bush encroachment. It is more difficult because of ownership issues, but we've got around that in the wildlife sector, the forestry sector, and in other ways. And through smart partnerships and other mechanisms, one can bring the same sorts of benefits to the farmers in the communal areas and the ecological benefits that are taking place on the freehold land at the moment. So I think that's one of the next areas that really needs to be explored and the whole program developed in those areas. Areas like the Okokorara area, for example, where there's severe bush encroachment, those areas also need attention.
Anything you'd like to add on there, Colin?
So I'd like to also mention the fact that biomass is intrinsically decentralized. And what we need to ensure in the country is that not everyone loses all opportunities in the rural areas and floods the cities. Our cities cannot sustain the entire Namibian population. We're seeing a lot of urban or rural-urban migration, and we just don't have the infrastructure, the housing, the water to sustain everyone moving to the bigger cities in search of better opportunities. So the biomass industry really has a critical role to play in the economic development of the country, where it adds value in a decentralized way. For example, there are no big charcoal processing plants in Windhoek. They are all in the regions. They cater for their areas within the regions. All the value lies outside of the cities. So I think that's really an important consideration, and is why we need to, as a country, encourage the industry to flourish, and it's why we need to capture as much value as possible to keep people on the land and keep them as productive as possible.
So this has been really insightful. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming to share with us on our series Bush Talks. We've learned today that not only should we be using our bush biomass, but we really can. And there's so many opportunities and benefits available to all Namibians and to all Namibia through this industry. Perhaps if you could close us off, your final statements on this topic, and anything else you'd like to share. Michael, would you like to start us off with a closing?
Well, basically, I want to raise the issue of raising awareness and also education. We are looking into mainstreaming also artificial intelligence, and with UNIDO, our partner, United Nations Industrial Development Organization, we have developed an app now that is able to indicate that this particular species you should harvest, this you cannot harvest. And we are going to release it by next year so that we can also have some input from the stakeholders. I think that will help a lot in terms of the communal land harvesting agenda, because that's going to be a little bit a very ambitious plan for us to, as a country, to get into.
Fantastic. Sounds very interesting. Chris, your closing remarks.
Yeah, I think there are very few programs which have a strong long-term economic benefit, but are not only environmentally neutral, they're also environmentally beneficial. And that's what we're sitting with here. So I think the programs such as this, which let people know about what's happening, are very important because the opportunities are huge. I think it's also important that we take these programs to the people overseas, because Namibia's situation is rather unique. It's not something that people are familiar with. And when they hear about bush thinning or cutting bush, they automatically think bush deforestation. And we need to get that message across. We need to educate people, including the academics in Europe and elsewhere. The last area is that we really need to focus a lot more research on this whole area. Look at what are the carbon levels in areas that have been bush cleared compared to bushy areas. What is the water retention? That work needs to be expanded. Some of it's taking place. It needs to be expanded onto different soil types, different parts of the country. So we've really got hard data to add extra value to what we've been talking about today.
And Colin, your closing remarks.
I think we need to be very particular about where we want to develop this industry. I think the world is waking up to our opportunity, and they're seeing why it is so special, and we've done a lot to promote our industry. But we also need to be careful to pick and choose, because we're actually in a huge advantage, having such an amazing resource that checks all the boxes. And of course, it's a finite resource. It may regrow, but we need to ensure that we're choosing the highest value pathways possible and the ones that benefit Namibia as much as possible. And I would always err against export of an unfinished product. So that must change. The mentality must change there. We must not produce a product that doesn't benefit our country as much as possible. So we need to look at the next generation of products. We can't only be seeing this as an energy product, but what about seeing it as a renewable carbon source for the next generation chemicals and fuels that we could be running on? Why don't we see this as a point in which to take our country from being a primary producer of products to a tertiary producer of products? Right now the markets for carbon are exploding, and big corporates are looking to offset carbon, and we have a perfect opportunity here in Namibia to explore that. So we need to start looking at what's coming up, what are the opportunities in the future, and where we can actually evolve our industry away from just being a primary energy producer. It's very important that the entrenched industries are also looking at modernizing and at improving efficiencies. The charcoal sector is busy evolving in that direction. There are more and more centralized charcoal production projects coming online, and they make the most out of the biomass, again adding more value and being able to extract even more value out of the biomass itself. It's more environmentally friendly, it's more labor friendly, and ultimately it provides, or it produces, a much higher quality product which better represents our country and allows Namibia to set itself apart from other charcoal exporting countries. So I think it's very important, and not only for the charcoal sector but for the other sectors, we need to look at modernizing the industry. This will also allow us to access markets indefinitely in the future, because if we keep ourselves to a higher standard, we'll always be ahead of the curve, and that provides us our competitive advantage.
Okay, and thank you for joining us for this episode of Bush Talks. Do stay tuned, we'll be back with a lot more interesting information regarding this sector.